He stood out because he wasn't like the others who came through the door after midnight. He was different. I could sense it in the way he moved, the way he looked, the way he smelled. I'm not sure if it was the worn leather jacket, the faded band t-shirt, the hint of danger that clung to him like a second skin, the fact that he carried himself like a question mark in a world full of exclamation points. Whatever it was, there was something about him that set off alarm bells in the little part of my brain that's designated for assessing a person's potential harm factor. I didn't need to see the silver glint of a gun in his hand, or the flash of a shiv, to know that this guy was trouble. His eyes, though, those were the first giveaway. They were like chips of ice, hard and cold and unreadable in the dim light. They scanned the room, taking in every detail, like a predator sizing up its prey. Then they landed on me, and I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. They were the kind of eyes that had seen too much, felt too much, and had no qualms about using whatever means necessary to get what he wanted. In short, they were the kind of eyes that didn't belong in a place like this. I watched him walk up to the bar and slide onto a stool. From the corner of my eye, I saw him pull something out of his pocket. A pack of cigarettes, a lighter, a knife. I couldn't see his face, but I could hear the tension in his shoulders. The way he sighed, the slight tremor in his voice when he spoke. "Whiskey neat," he said. As I poured the amber liquid, I tried to read him, to piece together the puzzle that was this man. Where was he coming from? What had brought him to this dive bar in the middle of nowhere? Was he running from, and what was he running to? These questions swirled in my head, but there was only one way to find out the answers. I had to get closer. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I played the bartender, the oldest profession in the world, the one that requires you to listen more than you speak, to observe everything while pretending to pour a beer. And as I mixed his drink, I watched him closely. I watched him light a cigarette, the tip glowing like a miniature bonfire in the darkness. I watched him take a drag, the smoke curling from his nostrils like a phantom. I watched him stare into the amber depths of his whiskey, his eyes unreadable. And then he looked up, and for a moment our eyes met. And in that instant, I knew. He knew I was watching him. But instead of feeling exposed or foolish, a strange calm settled over me. Maybe it was the years of dealing with all types of people that had honed my instincts. Or maybe it was something else entirely. All I know is that in that moment, I wasn't afraid, because I had a feeling that this man, whoever he was just as lost as the rest of us. He was just trying to find his way home. If you enjoyed this suspenseful tale, don't forget to stay tuned for more captivating stories. Your support means the world to me. He moved with the calculated precision of someone accustomed to being in control. His eyes methodically scanning the nearly empty bar before settling on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I'd guess he was somewhere in his late 40s, but age had treated him with remarkable kindness. Every detail about his appearance screamed money. Not the flashy, desperate kind that comes with gold chains and designer logos, but the quiet confidence of old wealth that whispers rather than shouts. His black turtleneck was perfectly tailored beneath an expensive trench coat that hung from his shoulders like it had been custom-made for his frame. Even his posture told a story of privilege, unnaturally straight and deliberate, as if someone had spent years teaching him how to carry himself through boardrooms and country clubs. What struck me most wasn't his obvious affluence, but how utterly out of place he was in my dive bar. This was a man who belonged in penthouses and private clubs, not nursing drinks in a place where the floor had unbeen properly cleaned in months, and the bathroom door did unlock properly. Yet he moved through the space with complete confidence, as if he owned every establishment he entered, regardless of its condition or clientele. He approached the bar with purposeful strides and took a seat directly in front of me, folding his hands neatly on the scarred wooden surface. When I approached to take his order, his gaze traveled briefly to the top-shelf bottles behind me, before he requested a 30-year-old scotch, without even checking the price. As I poured the golden liquid into a rocks glass, he surprised me with a question that seemed innocent enough at first. "Do you enjoy working here?" The smile that accompanied his words was warm and genuinely interested, the kind that made you want to open up to a stranger. I found myself responding honestly, telling him that I did enjoy the work, even cracking a self-deprecating joke about the glamorous life of a bartender. There was something disarming about his manner. He had the presence of a successful businessman who remembered everyone's name and asked about their families. The kind of man who coached Little League on weekends and never raised his voice, even when disappointed. Nothing about our interaction felt threatening or inappropriate, just pleasantly unexpected. As we chatted, he seemed genuinely interested in my responses, nodding thoughtfully and asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually listening. Then came the question that should have been my first real warning. Have you ever thought about doing something bigger with your life? The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I couldn't quite grasp. It was entirely inappropriate. Plenty of customers had offered unsolicited career advice after a few drinks, but something in his tone suggested this was on casual conversation. When I gave him my standard diplomatic response about being content for now, I caught a flicker of something in his expression, disappointment, maybe, or calculation. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long before he suddenly asked what time I got off work. The question caught me completely off guard, because nothing in our interaction had suggested romantic interest. No lingering glances, no subtle compliments, no gradual escalation of flirtation. It felt jarring and out of character with the sophisticated gentleman persona he'd maintained. I deflected with a vague answer and busied myself wiping down the already clean bar top, hoping he'd take the hint. Instead of pressing or seeming embarrassed by the rejection, he simply smiled with what looked like understanding, as if my response had confirmed something he already knew. He drained his drink in one smooth motion, reached into his wallet, and placed a crisp $100 bill on the bar, easily 4 times what he owed. Without another word, he stood up, straightened his coat, and walked back into the night, leaving me staring at the money and wondering what kind of game I'd just unknowingly played. For 7 days, the encounter replayed in my mind like a song you can't shake. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than an awkward interaction with an eccentric, wealthy patron who'd had too much to drink before arriving at my bar. People with money often live by different social rules, and maybe his directness was just a byproduct of a life where doors opened with the flash of a credit card. Still, something about the whole exchange felt choreographed, as if I'd been an unwitting participant in an audition I didn't know I was taking. When he returned exactly 1 week later, my heart dropped into my stomach. But this time he wasn't alone. The woman beside him commanded attention the moment they walked through the door, though not in the way she was trying to achieve. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, dressed in clothing that seemed designed to shave years off her age. Trendy pieces that looked expensive, but somehow desperate, like a costume worn by someone trying to infiltrate a group they didn't naturally belong to. Her makeup was applied with professional precision, but there was something theatrical about it, too perfect for the casual setting of a dive bar at midnight. What unsettled me most was how she moved through the space, where the man had seemed naturally confident. She appeared to be performing confidence, every gesture calculated and rehearsed. She surveyed the bar like she was memorizing exits and blind spots, her eyes lingering on details that most customers would never notice: the location of the security cameras, the distance between the front door and the back office, the sightlines from various seating positions. As they approached the bar, I noticed the man's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the talkative, charming businessman from our previous encounter. Tonight he seemed content to fade into the background, letting his companion take center stage in whatever performance they were about to give. I set down napkins in front of them both, preparing to take their drink orders, when the woman completely bypassed any normal greeting. "You're so pretty," she gushed, her voice pitched with artificial enthusiasm that made my teeth ache. As she spoke, her fingers brushed against my forearm, lingering just long enough to cross the boundary from accidental contact to deliberate touch. The compliment should have been flattering, but delivered in her overly familiar tone. It felt like the opening line of a script she'd memorized. I forced a laugh and thanked her. But every instinct I developed during my years of handling drunk customers was screaming warnings I could not yet articulate. I took their drink orders. Top-shelf whiskey for him, something trendy and overpriced for her. And as I poured, the interrogation began. She peppered me with questions that masqueraded as friendly small talk, but felt more like a job interview conducted by someone who already knew the answers. How long had I been working here? How old was I? Did I live alone? What were my hours? Did I have family in town? Each question was delivered with that same artificial brightness. but I could sense her cataloging my responses, filing away details for some purpose I couldn't fathom. Throughout this one-sided conversation, I kept catching her exchanging glances with her silent companion. They seemed to be communicating without words, tiny nods and subtle expressions that suggested they were following some predetermined plan. The whole interaction felt like theater, and I was the only one who didn't know what role I was supposed to be playing. Then came the proposition, delivered with the smoothness of a practiced sales pitch. She leaned in conspiratorially, lowering her voice, as if she was about to share a precious secret, rather than make what sounded like the most obvious scam in history. She ran something called an exclusive event club, she explained, and she was always on the lookout for young, fun people to work private parties. The money was incredible, she promised. $10,000 for a single weekend. Easy work, safe environment, exclusive clientele. I let out a nervous laugh and told her it sounded too good to be true, hoping my skepticism would end the conversation. Instead, she doubled down, insisting it was completely legitimate and that dozens of girls just like me were already working for them. Her smile never wavered throughout the entire pitch, maintaining that unnaturally bright expression, even when it became clear I wasn't buying what she was selling. She kept circling back to the same keywords: fun, safe, exclusive, like a telemarketer reading from a script. The final test came when she casually suggested I step outside for a moment. There was someone in their car, she explained, who could explain the opportunity better than she could. Every survival instinct the first possessed suddenly activated at once. I dropped all pretense of politeness and told her firmly that I wasn't interested. No smile this time, no diplomatic deflection. As if summoned by my rejection, a group of late-night customers pushed through the front door. Their loud conversation and laughter shattering the tense bubble that had formed around our conversation. The woman's mask slipped for just an instant, a flash of irritation crossing her features before she quickly composed herself. Without another word, she and her silent companion abandoned their barely touched drinks and disappeared into the night, leaving me shaken and wondering what I had just narrowly avoided. Yeah, when I got home, I called my boss Rick and told him to come over because I knew that look, that crazy look that she gave me. Yeah, it's not good. He's gonna come over here. Yeah, he's gonna come over here. Okay, yeah, so now we got a security system set up and we're working together. So how do we keep safe? First of all, I make sure the doors are locked. So I double, triple check that the front door is locked and the back door is locked. I keep the patio door locked. And then I have Rick's number programmed into my phone. So if I need to call him, I just push a button. I don't have to type anything. It has just one push of a button, and then he'll get there as fast as he can. If it happens again, I tell him, I say, listen, something really weird happened. It's people, I think they're casing the joint. So he comes over and he looks around. Yeah, so we've got the security cameras set up and we're working together. So how do we keep safe? Well, we take turns staying late. One of us is always there with the other one. It's just out of caution. We just stay late sometimes. You know, we'll work an extra 30 minutes, an extra hour, just to cover our ass. That way, if something does happen, there's always somebody there with somebody else. Also, I tell him to park in the back so nobody can hide in his car because we were pretty sure that est what they did. So if he parks in the back, then nobody can hide in his car. Nobody can hide in his car. I don't know if they were armed. I don't want to think about that. I try not to think about that. But I do remember the fact that the guy, when he shook my hand, his fingers were really long and thin and bony, like an old man's fingers. And that stuck with me, because I thought, God, that guy's got a gun in his pocket. I don't want to be anywhere near him. So I'm a little worried about that, but I try not to let it show. But we take turns staying late, and we watch each other's backs, so we got that covered. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet, though I'd be lying if I said I ever truly relaxed during that period. Every shift felt like a performance where I was simultaneously the actor and the audience. Hyper-aware of my own vulnerability, while trying to maintain the professional demeanor that paying customers expected, I developed new habits born of paranoia, parking closer to the front entrance, keeping my phone charged and within arm's reach, and sending Rick random check-in texts just to establish a pattern of communication that would seem normal, if I ever needed to send an emergency message. The false sense of security that had begun to creep in was shattered on a Tuesday night that started exactly like dozens of others. The usual trickle of late-night customers had dwindled to nothing by 11:30, leaving me alone with the familiar sounds of the building settling and the distant hum of highway traffic. I was mindlessly wiping down the bar top and considering whether business was slow enough to justify. Closing 30 minutes early, when the front door opened with its characteristic creak, she walked in like she owned the place. That same artificially bright smile plastered across her face, as if we were old friends reuniting after a pleasant separation rather than predator and prey meeting for what I somehow knew would be the final time. The woman from the exclusive club moved with more confidence than before. No longer bothering with the pretense of browsing or appearing casual, this was a woman who had made a decision and was here to execute a plan. My fingers found my phone without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding them to compose a text to Rick. Inventory check, I typed. The code words that would bring help racing across town. But even as I hit send, I knew that 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours if this woman had come here to end whatever game we'd been playing. Thought I'd come check on you, she said. Settling onto a bar stool with the casual ease of someone who had already won a contest I was still trying to understand. Her tone was conversational, friendly even, but there was something predatory in her relaxed posture that made my skin crawl. This was not the nervous energy of our previous encounters. This was the calm confidence of someone who had moved beyond persuasion to action. I told her we were closing, that she needed to leave, my voice carrying more authority than I felt. Instead of the argument I expected, she made an exaggerated, pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. As if my refusal was nothing more than a minor inconvenience to be charmed away, the request felt like a test. And every instinct told me that saying no would accelerate whatever timeline she was operating under. I decided to pour the drink, calculating that the few minutes it would take to prepare it properly might be enough time for Rick to arrive. As I reached for the whiskey bottle, my back turned to her for what felt like the longest 30 seconds of my life. I listened for any sound that might indicate she was moving or signaling someone outside. The bar felt impossibly quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. When I turned back around with the completed cocktail, she was gone. The bar stool sat empty, her absence somehow more terrifying than her presence had been. It was 2 a.m., and my last call was an odd one. A woman at the end of the bar, her face half hidden in the shadows, asked me to pour her a vodka and soda. Sure. As I turned away to grab a glass, I heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. When I turned back, the woman was gone, vanished into thin air. I rushed to the back door, flung it open, and screamed for the manager. Rick was there within seconds, his face creased with concern. We checked the locks, all of them securely fastened. Then we went inside to check the security footage. That's when we saw how she'd done it. The woman had carefully knocked the glass off the top shelf, drawing my attention away from the back door. While I was dealing with the mess, someone had slipped in and unfastened the lock. She then retreated to the front, probably alerting the getaway driver that the coast was clear. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Their methodical approach to documenting the scene felt both reassuring and inadequate. They photographed everything: the locked front door, the damaged back entrance where someone had been working on the lock mechanism, even the abandoned cocktail I'd poured for the woman. But I could see in their expressions that they'd encountered this type of situation before, and the weary professionalism in their voices suggested that catching these people would be more complicated than simply running a license plate, and they were right. The security footage review revealed details that made my blood run cold. The cameras had captured not just the woman's carefully orchestrated distraction, but also 2 additional figures in dark masks, who had been crouched beside the front entrance while I was preparing her drink. They'd been waiting there the entire time, ready to grab me the moment I tried to flee through what I thought was my escape route. The coordination was terrifying. While the woman kept me busy and someone else worked on the back door, these 2 had been positioned to ensure that no matter which direction I ran, I would end up in their hands. What made the footage even more chilling was the revelation of their backup plan. The person working on the rear entrance hadn't been trying to break in quietly. They'd been deliberately making noise, creating the sounds that would drive me toward the front door where their accomplices were waiting. I hadn't been dealing with amateur opportunists. This was a sophisticated operation run by people who understood psychology as well as they understood logistics. The license plate Rick had managed to record turned out to be as useful as we'd hoped and as frustrating as I'd feared. The plates were unregistered, either stolen or fabricated, making it impossible to trace the van back to its owners. The police assured me they'd be checking with other jurisdictions to see if similar operations had been reported elsewhere. But the detective's tone suggested this was a long shot that rarely paid off. Months have passed since that terrifying night, and while no arrests have been made, the experience did result in one positive change. Rick refuses to schedule me for solo shifts anymore. Policy adjustment that probably saved the bar money on insurance premiums, while definitely improving my peace of mind. Having another person around during those vulnerable late-night hours has restored some of the confidence that the whole experience had stolen from me. Still, questions haunt me during every shift. How did they know I typically worked alone on weeknights? Had they been watching the bar for weeks, learning our staffing patterns, and identifying the most vulnerable targets? The level of planning they demonstrated suggested this wasn't a crime of opportunity, but a carefully researched operation. I often wonder what would have happened if I'd been just a little less paranoid, a little more trusting, or if Rick had been stuck in traffic that night. Some questions are better left unanswered. Just the usual graveyard shift at the stop and go. That's all Marcus thought when he clocked in at midnight and settled into his routine. 6 months earlier, he'd taken the overnight shift to blow off some steam after a messy breakup. What he had unexpected was that the strange piece of working alone in a near-empty convenience store would grow on him. He liked the quiet hum of the refrigerators, the predictable lull and rush of traffic, and the feeling of having a small space to himself. This night was no different than any other until 2:30 a.m. when even the steady stream of truckers had vanished, leaving Marcus to wonder if the solitude would ever end. He stepped out back for a breather, the cold night air a welcome change from the stale smell of coffee and microwave popcorn that permeated the store. Darkness pressed in from all sides, making the parking lot feel like a stage set. Spotlights revealed nothing more interesting than a scattering of trash and a family of raccoons rummaging in the dumpster. And just when he was about to head back inside, he noticed movement in the far corner. A dark shape seemed to be pacing just beyond the reach of the security lights. It was a man wearing a dark red hoodie. At first, Marcus dismissed him. Plenty of truckers took walks to stay awake, but then he realized the man wasn't walking toward anything in particular, nor did he seem to notice the store. He was alone in the near-total darkness, just beyond the reach of the gas station S-light, and just within the range of Marcus's gaze. And something about the way the man shuffled uneasily disturbed him. The man continued his strange pacing for several minutes, then abruptly broke into a jog, dashing across the lot and bursting through the glass doors. Heart pounding, Marcus watched as the man approached the counter. Relief flooded him as he saw a second man enter. Clearly, this guy had a friend drop him off for a snack break. But when the man began speaking, his distress grew. The man claimed his car had broken down. He needed a jump start or a ride to the next town. Marcus, concerned but wary, asked where his companion was. The man gestured vaguely outside and mumbled something about a car. Something wasn't right. Marcus could tell by the twitching of the man's eyes, the tightness of his clenched fists. As he listened to the man's story, Marcus glanced at the security monitor behind the counter. The camera's limited vision showed nothing but empty pavement. Relieved that nothing was out of the ordinary, he turned back to the man who was still waiting patiently. That's when Marcus saw it, the faintest movement on the security monitor. With a jolt, Marcus realized the two men had planned this. One would distract him while the other waited in the car. Adrenaline surged through Marcus. He pressed the emergency panic button, sending an alarm rolling through the store. But instead of fleeing, the man smiled, revealing a glint of teeth in the dim light. He turned and walked calmly out the door, disappearing into the darkness along with his accomplice. As sirens wailed in the distance, Marcus stood by the window watching the empty road. The solitude was gone, replaced by a chilling realization that sometimes the quietest nights are the ones that hide the most danger. Do you ever feel like you're being watched? Like there are eyes tracking your every move, observing your actions and recording your life without your consent? Imagine going to work one day and feeling a sense of unease, a feeling that something isn't right. You try to shake it off, but the feeling persists. growing stronger until it becomes a constant shadow following you everywhere you go. That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a young woman who worked the night shift at a big box store. Her job was simple, working in the electronics department, helping customers, and keeping the place organized. But lately, things had changed. There was a new face around, a man who seemed to be watching her every move. At first, she thought nothing of it. People come and go. But as days turned into weeks, his presence became more unsettling. Never made a purchase, never spoke to anyone, just observed. He would stand by the clearance TVs, staring at her as she worked. When she restocked the shelves, he would linger nearby, almost as if waiting for her to finish. His gaze was intense, unwavering, making her feel self-conscious and uneasy. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but the man's presence was a distraction. His mere existence disrupted the rhythm of her tasks, turning a once familiar routine into a chore. The fluorescent lights of Walmart at 3 a.m. cast everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow that seemed to leach the color from whatever it touched. Sarah had grown accustomed to this artificial twilight during her 6 months on the night shift, learning to navigate the vast emptiness of a store designed for crowds but occupied by only a skeleton crew of stalkers and the occasional insomniac customer. Wandering the aisles like a ghost ship, searching for a port. Working the electronics department during these dead hours had its advantages. The section stayed quieter than grocery or clothing, attracting customers with specific needs rather than browsers. Most of her interactions were brief and purposeful. Someone needing a phone charger for a long drive, a trucker looking for earbuds to block out his partner's snoring shift workers. Like herself, grabbing supplies before heading home to sleep while the rest of the world woke up. The routine had become comfortable in its predictability, which made the appearance of her unwelcome observer all the more unsettling.